So this is a review for Rabbit of Seville, and joining me in Seville, I guess, is my fellow opera singer, my good friend Matty Cruz, the Toonie tenor. Say hi.
How do?
How do? No, see, I don't have the, I don't have the volume. I've got the Aussiness, but not the volume. It's a curse I live with every day. A few bits of info to get underway. So first of all, this is Rabbit of Seville, released on the 16th of December 1950. It had a blue ribbon reissue sometime in the late 60s. It's the 607th in the series, and it's directed by Chuck Jones. So this is lost media. You can't find it anywhere. No, I'm kidding, of course. This was on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 1, Platinum Collection Volume 1, Bugs' 80th set. It's on HBO Max. It's just about everywhere except on YouTube because it's a copyrighted short. And I can't show it to you in full here. But in case you're one of the few that hasn't seen this cartoon, because it seems to be one that everyone has seen, well, it's just Bugs versus Elmer, only this time they end up backstage at an opera. Bugs uses this opportunity to use the show to give Elmer a grooming he will never forget.
Oh, ouch, ouch, oh, ouch, oh, ouch.
I'll give the few bits of trivia first up that's not really music related, because be in for a treat here, because Manny will go through all of it. So, opening cast sheet has the Italian named versions of Eddie Seltzer, Marco Maltese, and Chuck Jones. So Eddie Seltzer was the producer, Marco Maltese the writer, and of course Chuck Jones is the director. And weirdly enough, I've seen this cartoon so many times, and I mean so many times. It's one of those quote-unquote overplayed shorts, probably good reason, it's a great short. Arthur Q. Bryan only has one line.
Oh, where do I get that wabbit?
And he's so prominent in this short, but yeah, he only sings that one line.
Oh, wait, I get that wabbit.
Beautiful. Maybe more next. Yeah, see, I'm going to direct you. It's like you're doing
I got to work on my Elmer Fudd diction. Wabbit.
And one interesting close-up actually has Bugs has 5 fingers. So no doubt when this part was animated, someone would have either modeled for the animator, and I know that some of you can identify animators are probably screaming through your monitors as to who actually animated that, but yeah, definitely let me know who it is. But whoever animated it, yeah, there's no doubt they used reference for it, and it's so brief. It's like, I'm pretty sure no one in the audience is going, oh, nah, the cartoon's ruined. He's got 5 fingers in that one shot. Nah, I'm out of here. I want my nickel back. Well, was it nickel or dime? I don't know. Some sort of American currency. But no, it's just an interesting little thing I noticed they were watching it. But I heard that this is based off a real musical. It's a bit of a rumor, though. Is there any truth to that rumor?
I believe there is. So, most of the cartoon, with the exception of a brief little snippet of the Wedding March from A Midsummer Night's Dream by Felix Mendelssohn, the entire cartoon has the overture to the opera by Gioachino Rossini, definitely one of the most prominent and most well-known opera composers in history. He wrote, the Barber of Seville. He wrote William Tell. He wrote Cenerentola, which is based off of the story of Cinderella. Most of his music is comedic in nature. He has some serious works, and his music is heavily used in animation, in particular the overture to the Barber of Seville, which is this entire cartoon. You have a little bit of his Stabat Mater, a serious piece of music that he composed that was used in one cartoon I can think of is Bugs Bunny Rides Again. You hear a little bit of Rossini there. And from the same opera, The Barber of Seville, is the aria, which every animation fan knows. So an aria in opera music, especially from opera music of this time period, it was broken up in different sections. You have the overture. So the overture in an opera, there are 2 definitions. So overture means the orchestral introduction to a musical dramatic work. So for example, a play or an opera. This music fits that definition of an overture. So if you were to go see this performance in person, the audience sits down, the conductor comes, the audience applauds, and then the orchestra starts playing and nothing's happening on stage. The actors and the singers and the prop people and the sets are getting ready to perform. The overture is played, and then once the overture is over, the curtain rises and then the opera properly starts. The other definition of an overture is an orchestral concert piece written especially as a single movement in sonata form. So that is a piece of music that you would intend to be an overture like in an opera, but it was only written for that and nothing else. So it's not connected to an opera or to a play. For example, we just recorded the commentary for Caveman Inky, and the music that's featured for the Minor Bird in the Inky cartoons is a concert overture. So it's only meant to be played by itself, and that's it. Piece being the Hebrides, better known as Fingal's Cave. An aria is a solo song for the singer, because when you watch an opera, especially from this time period, you have the overture, you have little ensemble scenes, two or more characters sing at the same time, you have a little chorus, you have an ensemble piece, and then you have the recitative or the recitativo, which is dialogue that's half sung, half spoken. It pretty much brings the plot along. When you're watching an opera, it usually goes recitative, they add some exposition to the story, they're half singing, half speaking, and the orchestra is only broken into, they call it the basso continuo. So you have an instrument like the harpsichord playing just basic chords, and then you have like a cello or a bass playing the root of the chord. It's pretty much bum bum da 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 bum bum bum, very simple, and then the full orchestra comes in whenever the ensemble sings or when a soloist sings an aria. So the Barber of Seville, entitled Il Barbiere di Siviglia, premiered in 1816 and was probably his most famous opera. The story of the Barber of Seville is actually based off plays written by the French playwright Pierre Beaumarchais. Later, at the end of the cartoon, Bugs and Elmer get married in the cartoon, and Bugs drops Elmer in a cake. He drops him into a cake that says "The Marriage of Figaro." Now, if you go by the plays that these stories were originally adapted from, Pierre Beaumarchais wrote three plays. He wrote The Barber of Seville first, then he wrote The Marriage of Figaro, and then he wrote The Guilty Mother. The Marriage of Figaro, the story, was adapted into an opera, not by Rossini, but by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So Mozart composed the opera The Marriage of Figaro, or in Italian, Le Nozze di Figaro, in 1786. Now, that opera, if you go by the original story, canonically, it is the second part of the Beaumarchais trilogy. So think of it this way: Mozart wrote the opera version of The Empire Strikes Back 30 years before Rossini wrote the opera version of A New Hope, if that makes any sense for all the Star Wars nerds out there. I have no knowledge of an opera version of the third part of the trilogy, The Guilty Mother, but there are similar characters. So, for example, Figaro is in both operas. Count Almaviva is in both operas. The Contessa or the Countess is in both operas. But depending on what you're listening to, different types of singers sing it. So, for example, in The Marriage of Figaro, the Mozart opera, Count Almaviva, one of the main characters of the opera, is sung by a baritone, so a man who has a voice in the middle range. But in The Barber of Seville, the Rossini opera that this cartoon is based off of, a tenor sings Count Almaviva. So if I ever do this opera, I could sing that role. And Figaro himself, in both The Marriage of Figaro and The Barber of Seville, he's sung by a baritone. The most famous piece of music from this, besides the overture, is Figaro's aria, Largo al Factotum, or as most people know it as, the song where Figaro just says his name multiple times: Figaro, 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 Figaro. Sadly, this cartoon does not feature it, but pretty hard to find the Figaro's aria in other cartoons. I mean, it's not like it's been used by Fritz Freeling or or Walter Land Studio or other.
Nah,
Yeah,
very
you know
obscure.
exactly what piece of music I'm talking about.
Figaro, 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 Figaro. Figaro. Figaro, Figaro. Figaro? Figaro. Figaro.
The overture itself from the original opera has no words. It's strictly an instrumental piece. But tying it to something that you said before, I believe either before or during the recording, Mike Maltese and Chuck Jones brilliantly added lyrics to the melody of the overture. Because in the orchestral version, you have the violins and the flutes and the oboes and other instruments playing the melody in the overture itself. But through the work of Carl Stalling and Milt Franklin and Mike Maltese and Chuck Jones, they added brilliant lyrics to this thing. And it's funny, most people will sing this cartoon when they're thinking of the Barber Seville overture, and they probably won't even realize that, yeah, those lyrics were written over 100 years after the original music was premiered.
The lyrics, more or less, it's basically Weird Al before Weird Al. It's just a parody, adding lyrics to a different music and changing the meaning completely.
You just said everything I wanted to say in one sentence. They took orchestral music, added lyrics to it, and created a parody. Why couldn't I have thought of that in 15 seconds or less? 15
Wow.
seconds or less, you get your money back. For the rest of the music, I mean, like, it's pretty much the entire overture. That's it. And with the little snippet at the end of the wedding march from Felix Mendelssohn, the wedding march is originally from work by Mendelssohn called Midsummer Night's Dream. You talk about Rossini, the composer. I mean, you'll be here for a while. Barber of Seville, the William Tell Overture, and the opera William Tell as well. If you love opera, you're going to be encountering the works of Giuseppe Verdi, the works of Giacomo Puccini, Richard Wagner, Mozart, obviously, and Rossini. Like, those are some of the titans of opera itself. And as I always tell people, my musical education came from watching Warner Brothers cartoons, and I'm so passionate about having people watch these cartoons, especially for kids, because this is their way of making the music of Rossini, of Mozart, of Tchaikovsky, of Brahms, of all these titans of the classical and romantic periods of music accessible to them.
Exactly. And the good thing is, even if you're not big on opera, this cartoon still works. And there's a reason why it's quote unquote overplayed, because, just about everyone who's into Looney Tunes has seen this one. And doing these as reviews, my first thought goes to, what on earth can I add to the discussion compared to what's already been discussed? Because if you get the Golden Collection, hint, hint, buy the stuff, Eric Goldberg does a commentary. It's a wonderful commentary. He actually identifies animators and his observations, and he basically says that this is his favorite cartoon of all time. It's fantastic. In fact, it's so fantastic that the actual premise is so absurd. You'd think the audience would run away hearing gunshots in the background. Where are the other cast members that were going to do the show? I mean, wouldn't they say, get off the stage, you idiots, kind of thing? But no, the cartoon's so good that only idiots like me think about these things. Think about it. You just go with it because it's so damn funny. It's also a good way to keep down costs too, because you essentially just have two characters and the conductor, and that's pretty much it. But
to your point about the people backstage and like, hey, what's going on in the conductor? I do love the face of the conductor when he looks at his watch. He's like, all right, I guess we're starting to show early. I mean, I've seen that face in so many other musicians' faces. Like, if we start a gig early or something's not working, we're just, the heck with it. Let's just go with it. And your point about not knowing when to come on their cues, you got to give all the credit in the world to all the stage hands and the stage directors and the stage managers that tell you places and 5 minutes to curtain and blah, blah, blah. The people in this cartoon were smart. They just, they ran away and, I don't know, got something to drink or eat. They're like, the heck with it. Let the rabbit and the hunter do all the music.
And speaking of faces, is Elmer's face when the curtain rises, is that pretty much your face when it comes to perform solo?
Oh, yeah. Every single time I screw up, which is every performance I have. No, I mean, I always tell people, look, you're never going to have a perfect performance, but those moments where you just feel so triumphant, Bug's smug face throughout the cartoon, that's how you feel when you nail a high note or everything's working musically. And then when the curtain rises and Elmer's dread, probably my favorite reaction when Bugs cuts his pants and Elmer's pants droop down, he pulls it up and he turns beet red. I'm like, oh yeah, that's happened to me plenty of times on stage.
What, your pants falling down? But when we get right into the action where Bugs sings those wonderful lyrics, I mean, one of my favorite bits is the shaving bit with Bugs' determination when he's shaving rather aggressively Elmer's face, which I believe has been cut from television numerous times. Wow, as someone who shaves with a blade, yeah, that's a bit cringy to look at, but what do you think?
As someone who goes to a barber every 2 to 3 weeks, obviously not for my head, so I sympathize with Elmer in this cartoon. My barber, I got to shout him out, Checo the Barber. Great stuff. Thank you, Checo. And actually, I'm definitely going to send him the review for this cartoon because I've spoken to him about our commentaries. He likes this cartoon too, so I'm going to send this to him. But I know he's a lot more delicate with shaving my face as opposed to Budge just like going to town. And I'm like, ooh, like you said, like when you watch it's like, ooh, like I feel like I'm watching a horror movie for a second. I'm expecting like blood splatter to come out. I was like, oh wait, no, this is Warner Brothers cartoon is supposed to be funny, not some Jason slasher film or Freddy Krueger or whatever.
Exactly. Now, the timing is something that stands out in this short, and what's interesting is how we always point out Friz Freleng as being the master of timing, and hey, I still stand by that. But here, Chuck Jones shows that, hey, his timing can be really amazing too. Just the way that the characters move to the music. And as Eric Goldberg points out in his commentaries, you have certain animated movements where one part of the Bugs' body would animated to the beat, another part would be animated to the actual melody. And it's just done so well. The whole and the head's bobbing, bump, 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 bump. It's just fantastic.
When you think of timing and animation, clearly the master was Friz Freleng because he did have a musical background. But Chuck Jones was just the undisputed champion of Warner Brothers cartoons from the late 40s on. And it seems like every single cartoon that he made, he did something right. And this cartoon is definitely one of the pinnacles of his career. And now that you bring this up about his timing, I'm wondering, like, he's made other musical cartoons that are phenomenal, like Baton Bunny and High Note and whatever. But part of me thinking, I'm like, did he go to Friz to work on some of the timing of this? Because his timing in his cartoon is at the level that Freleng has, and it's absolutely remarkable.
And if you look at the timing, the way Friz does his timing, because he does it absolutely to the beat, like uses bar sheets corresponding to the character's movements, but here, Chuck does it differently, but hey, they both work really well. I think both styles are equally fantastic. That's definitely a highlight for me in this short. But another highlight, of course, you got to have Bugs cross-dressing. I mean, how would you rate his cross-dressing in this one, huh?
I mean, I just love what he sings there, What would you want with a wabbit? One of the greatest lines I've ever heard in any piece of music. Can't you see that I'm much sweeter? I can be your little senorita. Oh, I'm sorry, but the titans of songwriting cannot compare to those lyrics. Mike Maltese wrote there. For someone who speaks Spanish as a second language, I was always under the assumption that the term was señorita, but I think señorita gets the job done a lot better.
I think so too, given the accent exactly. And I just love how they always do everything to play into the Barber theme, including when Bugs is controlling the shaver with, what's that instrument called?
I'm assuming it kind of looks like a clarinet, but it sounds like an oboe. Let's just say like it's an oboe. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, and I like the fact that going with the theme of barbers, it's a shaver that comes to life. I think that's just an excellent gag work right there. It's just, everything works so perfectly. Sorry, I'm just gushing so much of this cartoon. There is a reason, folks, that this is overplayed, as I mentioned before. It is that good. And of course, we get Chuck not only does Friz Freleng, so to speak, in terms of timing, but he also does Tex Avery. So first time you see the barber chairs going up in the air, so that's Chuck doing his variation what Tex Avery had done in some cartoons.
Well, that whole scene right there, talking again about the timing, I just love the bum ba 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 bum ba, and it's like every time it has an accented note, like you hear the gunshot da ba 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 boom ba, and then when you hear the gunshot going off during that little sequence right there when they're on the chairs, I get a kick out of that.
But more importantly, it's the whole one-upmanship with the guns. With the guns and the cannons and all that. I mean, that's a Tex Avery joke right there. So it's interesting to see Chuck do his variation on it. And that's one of my favorite parts as well, aside from the hacking part, the whole one-upmanship.
America. You have a big gun, I'm going to get an even bigger one. But yeah, just that part in particular with them rising on the chairs, just so well done. But when the sandbag falls on Elmer and he spins down, he falls out. It works so seamlessly. And then later on in the cartoon, where Elmer leaves through the revolving door, it spins around, and he comes back into the shop, and just seeing that his reaction on his face is just like, I was like, yeah, that's how I feel every morning when I wake up.
Plus the dance as well, that which I think is a nice little touch. That's an amazing one. Of course, Elmer's face when he thinks he's got hair, that's definitely a big like then it turns into the flowers perfectly timed to music. Dun, 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 dun.
That whole scene right there with the Figaro fertilizer, and when he starts playing the melody of the overture on Elmer's head with the very realistic looking hands on the piano, when he starts growing the beard, and that's what happens to me when I shave my beard. It grows that fast. I use Figaro fertilizer.
This video is sponsored by Figaro fertilizer, by the way.
Figaro fertilizer. Never leave home without it. And I shave with a miniature lawnmower. I first saw this cartoon probably sometime when I was in middle school. I never got to see it when I was really young, but I did see it middle school when I got into this hobby. Now rewatching this cartoon, especially the scene where his hair regrows and then he's disappointed with the flower, I'm like, oof. That hits another level now, considering I've been shaving my head for the past 8 years. That's what I need to
Absolutely.
do. I need to grow flowers in my hair. Or hair, I should say.
Well, either or, I guess. And of course, the ending. It just gets me every single time when Elmer just decides to dress as a bride. Just why?
Why not? We could spend like another hour just talking about it. I mean, it's on the 100 greatest Looney Tunes list. I'm pretty sure this is in the 50 greatest cartoons book. I don't have the book in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's on the list. And this is definitely one of those cartoons that non Looney Tune fanatics always talk about. I mean, for example, I have one of the churches I sing at right now. One of the guys that goes to the church, he always sings this cartoon. I mean, he is a musician as well, but it's so prominent in the pop culture. A lot of them are Jones cartoons, and it just goes to the strength of his work in the 40s and 50s. I mean, everybody talks about Duck Dodgers. They always talk about the Hunters trilogy. They always talk about Michigan J. Frog, and they talk about this cartoon. They quote it, and notice the common trend. It's all Chuck Jones. And I can go into the whole thing about, oh, who's your favorite director? And I used to say, like, my favorite director was Bob Clampett. This is years ago, but there's something about every director. I love different aspects of the Warner Brothers cartoons, and a lot of it deals with just the takes that these directors had. I mean, you have the wonderful cartoons that Fritz Freeling made, and Bob Clampett, and Frank Tashlin, and Bob McKimson, and Tex Avery. And I'll admit, I'm a bit of a fanboy for Ben Hardaway and Cal Dalton. I know they're not the most well liked, but I find strengths and weaknesses in all the directors' input. But there's just something special about Jones in this period, and it translates into the entire zeitgeist. His work is the most well known to non Looney Tune fanatics, and this cartoon is a testament to his amazing work in that period.
As far as the rating goes, I mean, come on. Is it any surprise I'm going to give this 10 out of 10? I mean, seriously, if this isn't a 10, what is? And even if you're not the biggest fan of this short for whatever reason, like maybe you're more of a Bob Clampett fan, maybe you prefer Frizz, whatever, you still can't deny that this one has had a huge impact on the Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny and pop culture in general. And yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 for me, easily. There's no question there.
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say it's an 11 out of 10. It goes to 11? No, but yeah, this is a masterpiece. It's a 10 out of 10. I actually, shame on me, I was looking at my lists again, my 10 personal favorite Warner Brothers shorts, and I forgot to write this one down because I was like trying to do it without looking at a reference. I was watching another cartoon today that is on that list, Tom, Turk, and Daffy. I love that cartoon, but yeah, this one too. And I wonder what they have in common. Oh, right, turkeys. No, they're both made by Chuck Jones, and he's just excellent.
Of course, of course. So that will do it for this one. It's a long video, but hey, if any cartoon deserves it, it's certainly this one. So, as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.
Next. Dun, 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 dun.